Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with TBA Rabbinic Intern, Nico Losorelli.
Today's class is entitled, This Too is Prayer, an exploration of the Kaddishes. So we're going to be talking about Kaddishes. What are they? Where are they? Why are they? What do they make us think of? How do they make us feel? And on that last question, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of any Kaddish, whether it's Kaddish Shalem, Mourner's Kaddish, Hatzi Kaddish? Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, when you give an answer, to give your name, and I'll be repeating some of the answers into the microphone for people at home on Zoom and otherwise. So, yes, go ahead. Separation, great. Can you say a little bit more about that?
That it separates different parts of the service.
Great, so separates different parts of the service. Anything else? What else comes to mind when you think of Kaddish? Yeah? Aramaic. Okay, great point. So Brian's pointing out that the Kaddishes are actually written in another Jewish language, Aramaic. The majority of our Siddur is written in Hebrew, which we're all familiar with, but you'll notice when we get to a Kaddish, it's just slightly different. The spelling is a little bit different. The pronunciation is a little bit different, because it's actually Aramaic, which was the spoken language of one of the main spoken languages of the Rabbinic period. It would be like something in the text suddenly being in English. That's what everyone spoke, was Aramaic. Great. Anything else? What comes to mind when we think of Kaddishes? Sure? Praising God. Great. So now we're in a sort of a content mode. Praise of God. I'm surprised nobody said, finally Kiddush is coming, or what's next, or, standing up, sitting down. Wait, so these are great responses. We have sort of separation between parts of the service. We have Aramaic, so a different linguistic association. And then, what was the last thing you said? Praise. And then we have praise. Great. So, I often find, I'll speak for myself, that when I get to Kaddish, it's sort of a moment to zone out a little bit, right? We're like, okay, we're standing up, we're kind of moving on to the next thing. But I don't always take the time to actually read what I'm saying. Like, I have a feeling, especially if it's Kaddish Yatom, if it's Mourner's Kaddish, I'll have sort of a kavanah, which is an intention about who I'm thinking about, what I'm thinking about, but not necessarily the words. But I want to take a moment right now for us to actually go through the text in the English to get an idea of what it is we're actually saying. So now is going to be the time where you take your red Lev Shalem and turn to page 46, and you should find the Hatzi Kaddish on page 46. Do I have any volunteers who would like to read in the English aloud for us? Joey, are you comfortable using the microphone? What's that? Yes. Okay.
May God's great name be exalted and hallowed throughout the created world as is God's wish. May God's sovereignty soon be established in your lifetime and in your days, and the days of all the house of Israel, and we say, Amen. May God's great name be acknowledged forever and ever. May the name of the Holy One be acknowledged and celebrated, lauded and worshipped, exalted and honored, extolled and acclaimed, though God, who is blessed, is truly far, in brackets, beyond all acknowledgement and praise, or any expressions of gratitude or consolation ever spoken in the world, and we say, Amen.
Beautiful. Thank you. So, has anybody noticed anything different that they haven't noticed before in just reading this in English? And the answer can be no, but I'm just curious. Let's give you a second to think about it.
Well, may God's sovereignty be established in your life. I don't really understand.
So Bob is saying that he's noticed and has a question about, may God's sovereignty soon be established, and what does that mean? Great. Anything else that sort of stuck out to us that's new or intriguing? Yeah.
I think I read the part in brackets. It's for the 10 days of repentance. When you say Le'elah twice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Translate here is far beyond.
Mm-hmm. So Joey is noting that on some special Shabbatot, some special days, the Kaddishes can sort of vary in minor ways textually. Great. If nothing else, I think this is an exercise to actually ask what it is that we're saying here, right? So where does this appear? And this is a hint at something you said before. Where does this Hatzi Kaddish appear? What comes before it? What comes after it? Great. Great. So Diego's saying it comes right before the Amidah, and it comes right after the Shema, right? So it's a transitionary piece of liturgy, coming between one major part of our liturgy and another part. Why would that be? Why not just, aside from maybe a halachic consideration, why put something in the middle of two really important pieces of liturgy? Yeah. Time for a bathroom break? That's okay. That's legitimate. Anybody else? Yeah, Joey.
Another place where it makes an appearance is after the Amidah,
Mm-hmm.
in the weekday service ending Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
This is where before we say Psalm 90 and 91.
Yeah.
To separate the two, so people don't think it's the continuation, that the Psalm is a continuation of the Amidah.
Right. So what we're talking about is that it's sort of a transitionary piece of liturgy, right? So why? What's that? Yes, we will. So why do we need a transition at all? Let's just take this specific example of the Shema moving to the Amidah. Why would we need a transition? Okay, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought, I need to go grab a spoon? And you've gone from your living room and you've walked out of the doorway of your living room and into the kitchen, and suddenly you've forgotten what you're looking for? Completely forgotten. This is called the doorway effect. It's a thing that researchers and psychologists have noted, that when you walk through a doorway, we have a greater sort of propensity of forgetting what we're doing or what we need or what we're looking for, right? So we're moving from the Shema in this particular part of the liturgy to the Amidah. It's a kind of doorway, right? So a doorway from one piece of liturgy to the next. Let's say we didn't actually have this, right? We wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to take a moment, take a step back and say, all right, I'm going to think about what I'm doing. I'm going to set some sort of intention or new intention. We might walk through a doorway and suddenly we're in the Amidah and we've sort of forgotten why we're there. So I'm curious, this is going to be very question heavy, so get ready to keep responding. Why would we need, why not just, now that I've said that, why not just barrel from the Shema to the Amidah? Why have this at all? Why can't we just lead from one thing to the next? Yeah.
You have a space to be able to think about things and have some kavanah, some intention of what you're doing.
Great. So, but Alan is saying you have a moment to think about your intention, your kavanah. So, ostensibly, we have some kavanah that we can set for the Shema and its blessings, and then another opportunity to set kavanah intentions for the Amidah. But those can be different, right? So this gives us a space and an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to take a pause, have a transition, and shift from one mode of thinking to another mode of thinking. But it sort of buoys us, right? There's a suspension of liturgy happening here, and what's at the heart of the liturgy is praise, right? Praise of God. It's almost one of the essential elements of davening, of prayer. Otherwise, we could just say, okay, have a break, take a moment, think, and it would be easy to start thinking of, my to-do list, my shopping list, my whatever. No, the liturgy is saying, we're going to take a moment, we're going to transition, but we need to focus. You're going to have one kavanah and maybe another one, but what you really need to focus on is the through line, and the through line is our connection to the divine, that which is greater than us, that which is bigger than us. So it's this opportunity to sort of be held, moving from one kavanah to the next, without getting too distracted or too lost, without walking through a doorway and forgetting why are we even there? Why am I suddenly standing with a siddur in my hands and praying words that I wasn't necessarily ready for? Great. Let's move on. I want you to hold that page and also turn to page 58, and we're going to look at the Mourner's Kaddish side by side with the Hatzi Kaddish. So just flip the pages back and forth. You can hold them kind of like I am, like this, just grasping both pages. What do you notice that's the same between the Hatzi Kaddish, and what do you notice that's different between the Hatzi Kaddish and the Mourner's Kaddish? Great. So Joey's saying there are two more paragraphs. So basically up until, so you have the Hatzi Kaddish, right? That ends in Amen, and that would be the end of the Hatzi Kaddish, which we also have in the Mourner's Kaddish, but then it goes on to say, Yehei Shalom Rabba min Shemaya b'chem alein v'kol Yisrael, right? And in the English that says, may heaven bestow on us and all Israel life and abundant lasting peace. And then the last sort of additional line is, Oseh Shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael, and we can add v'kol Yoshvei Tevel. May the one who grants peace on high bring peace to us and to all Israel who dwell on earth. And then we say, Amen, right? So now we're in the mourner's Kaddish. Why this difference? Why this sort of sameness in content, and then why these additional two pieces here, particularly for the mourner's Kaddish? Any ideas? Yeah?
Hatzi Kaddish is kind of finishing up the service.
Mm-hmm.
Mourner's Kaddish is to get relief by honoring.
That's nice. So, so what we said is the Hatzi Kaddish is sort of is finishing a part of the service, and then the mourner's Kaddish is a moment for someone to get relief. And I actually think that speaks to a question of the difference between speaking something and singing something, right? In the Hatzi Kaddish, we could use a number of tunes, but typically we don't just say it. We'll sing it, right? And that gives us one sort of feeling. And then in the mourner's Kaddish, we say it plaintively, just plain. What is the difference of feeling, and maybe the difference in kavanah between those two modalities of singing something and simply just saying something?
So the Hatzi Kaddish, I think, is serving as sort of a hard reset, as we talked about. Why we need to go into the Shmatzi Amidah. If we were to sort of barrel through, I feel like some of us, our eyes might glaze over by the time we get to the Amidah. We might not have proper kavanah for the Amidah. So Hatzi Kaddish serves as a hard reset to recenter our kavanah. And then the reason why we're sort of plainly saying the mourner's Kaddish is replicating this sort of like doleful, quiet, more intense atmosphere we're focusing on.
Right. So great. Brian is saying two things, answering a question from earlier of why the Hatzi Kaddish is a transitionary sort of piece of liturgy. Again, giving us the sort of, somebody said before, an opportunity to move from one kavanah to the next, because it could be that you get halfway through the Amidah and you're suddenly like, oh wait, I haven't even thought about the words I'm saying, or I haven't even said an intention. So the Hatzi Kaddish and other Kaddishes being sort of these markers, these sort of bookends or bookmarks, give us this opportunity to have a hard reset, have a shift. And then the second thing that Brian was pointing out was a stylistic sort of comment, right? That something sung, I'm going to just insert sort of the song part, something sung might be, okay, there's a very big difference between right? And right? We have one that's sort of minor, and then we have one which is we sort of think of as a little sadder, and one that's major and is a little bit more triumphant. But then we have something that's just spoken, right? To sort of elicit this doleful, to use the word that you're using, doleful, mournful, sort of plaintive, personal moment that we're all sort of sharing in. And it's interesting because the text is more or less the same, right? And we don't necessarily think about the content of the text that much, but we think about how it makes us feel. And so, in many ways, the Kaddishes are an opportunity to really get in touch with the kavanah, the intention that we're bringing to davening, because it's transitionary. Just as you walk through a doorway, I mean, we have our mezuzot, which also give us an opportunity to have a moment at a doorway. But just as we often walk through a doorway and don't necessarily think that we're walking through a doorway, so too might we do that if we didn't have a Kaddish, right? But we have the mezuzah, which in many ways is like I think sort of a transitionary, ritualistic item to say, okay, I'm moving from one space to the next. And the Kaddishes in many ways are sort of like our mezuzot, maybe, or our opportunity to do the same thing while we're davening to say, okay, I'm moving from one intention to the next. And maybe that's, I'm moving from the Shema to the Amidah. And let's say it's the weekday. Okay, I'm moving from the Shema to the Amidah. I have all of these things to think about, all of these things to ask for, people who I'm wishing healing for, and that I wasn't doing that in the Shema. Right? Or it could be the mourner's Kaddish, to take a moment to say, okay, now I'm going to sort of dredge up the memory of someone that I love, someone that is departed from this world, and I'm also going to stand in community. And I'm going to be, depending on the custom of a space, it could be that you're one of a couple people standing and everyone is sitting, right? And it's an opportunity for the community to see who's in mourning, to sort of support them with their words, to support them with their kavanah, and maybe have an opportunity to check in afterward, all right? So, and those are two very different kavanot, two very different functions, and yet the text is more or less the same. I want to sort of pause because I've been talking for a couple minutes straight. I want to see if anybody has any reflections, any ideas that they want to throw into the mix based on anything that has been said or that I just said. Yeah, Diego.
I just had a thought that, liturgically speaking, we're moving from like the most personal, the most communal, the Hatzikaj at least, the most communal part of the service, right? The Shema, to the most personal. So if you think about where exactly the Kaddish would put a doorway, it'd probably be there because it's such a sudden change. You don't want to be in a, maybe not, you want to recenter from a communal to a personal.
Right. So you're saying one, just as sort of a framework, the Hatzi Kaddish could be sort of thought as something more communal, something we're all doing together, and the Mourner's Kaddish is something more individual and personal. Is that right? Am I reflecting back what you were saying, right?
No, I'm saying
Okay.
we're going from the Shema where everybody's kind of in a group,
Yeah.
standing together, to the silently recited Amidah.
Okay.
The Hatzi Kaddish. So I want to go over that.
So we're moving from a communal thing to a personal thing in that instance. Okay, I could see that. Great. Yeah, I'm just gonna get hand back here and then I'll come to you. Yeah.
The Hatzikaj is only said by the Shaliach. People may use melody, which likes others, but it's a setup for the congregation. It's only recited with all Kaddishes, only recited with it's essentially a combination of a setup for the next stage again, recited by the individual for the community. The Mourner's Kaddish is essentially a public manifestation of private grief.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really essentially the people grieving now publicly proclaim the exaltation of God, but it's really a private grief in a public way.
Right.
Which is that you stand up, you stand out,
Exactly.
all of that. Very different type of experience.
Thank you. And there's a couple things that I want to pull out of what you just said. Typically, the Shaliach Tzibor is the only one who has to say necessarily a Hatzi Kaddish or Kaddish Shalem. There could be tunes that we do that we sing along with, but typically it's the Shaliach Tzibor, the prayer leader's responsibility. And that gives an opportunity to sort of set up the next play, if we can, in the game, if we're going to use that sort of analogy. And then when we're looking at the Mourner's Kaddish, it's an opportunity to bring a private experience into the public sphere. And there's a third thing that I was waiting for, was the comment of minyan, right? Kaddishes are something that we can only do with a minyan, which is a prayer quorum, meaning 10 people, right? A minimum of 10 people. There are a number of prayers that we can only do with a minyan, and it just so happens that Kaddishes are one of those forms of prayer that we can only do with a minyan. And so when we're thinking about, I'm really going to sort of like lead us a little bit, but when we're thinking about the minyan, about 10 people, gathering 10 people, why is that a value? Why is that important to us? It's the what of survival? So we're saying that the minyan is sort of the secret to the survival of the Jewish people, having a couple of functions, one of which being, it helped move us from sort of a land-centered people to a more transitionary, maybe more, a people that has to move from one place to the next. But I want to key in on the word transition. So let's think about Mourner's Kaddish. When we're in mourning, we're making a major transition, right? We're going from not being a mourner to being a mourner. We're going from having someone that we loved in our life to no longer having them in this life. And it can be a really difficult transition. It can be a really hard transition. It can be very easy to give up on community. It can be very easy to give up on self. And yet we're called to say the Mourner's Kaddish when we're in mourning for somebody. And not only that, we have to get 9 other people, in addition to us, 10 people together to do this ritual of mourning, right? Because it's a transition. And transitionary moments typically are thought of in the rabbinic mind as dangerous or scary. We are exposed in a way, right? And in many ways, we are exposed. But if we're thinking again about mourner's Kaddish specifically, we're going through this major transition. All these big questions are coming up, and suddenly our lives can take a major turn depending on what happens next. If nobody shows up for us, God forbid, that might be a very different outcome than if people do show up for us and we get 10 people together on a yard site or throughout our mourning to say mourner's Kaddish with us. We're being held in that transitionary moment with mourner's Kaddish. And in many ways, that's what Kaddishes do. They hold us in those transitionary moments because the mourner's Kaddish is a much higher stakes sort of question, right? Someone has passed away, God forbid. And now we need our community to show up for us, and it's a Jewish value to have 10 people to help us do that in order to make this private act of mourning public. And then we have something like the Hatzi Kaddish, that for the purposes of our conversation here, is appearing between the Shema and the Amidah, right? It can be very easy for us to forget what we're doing, to forget that we're here to do something bigger than ourselves, forget that we're here to do holy work, and sort of get sucked into the mundane, again, of the shopping list, of the to-do list, of the, oh no, did I lock my door? That's important, so if you didn't lock your door, probably go lock your door. But it can be very easy to lose that kavanah, and it's a kind of almost spiritual danger, right? Because if you are in one headspace, davening, connecting to God, your community, yourself, and then suddenly there's this gap, you could lose it. You could lose that curated, built, effortful, in a positive way, I would say effortful kavanah, and then have to rebuild it again when you move into the Amidah. But in our rabbi's wisdom and the wisdom of the liturgy, said, no, we actually need something to sort of carry us from one thing to the next, something to buoy us from one part of the liturgy to the next part of the liturgy so we can keep going up this ramp. Because when we also think of how the davening is set up, sort of more in a macro sense, it's like a ramp. It's often talked about as a ramp, right? And you can imagine if there was a hole in the ramp, you would fall through the ramp or you wouldn't be able to get to the next step. So the Kaddishes are kind of like connectors or connective tissue, sort of keep us on that ascent to the Amidah, which in many ways is the height of our davening, to then sort of come down back to the day-to-day. But I want to ask a question as we sort of move out of the shiur and into Mariv in a minute or two here. What does placing importance on transitions in our davening tell us about our lives? Tell us about how we should be living our lives, telling us about how we should be moving through space and experiences in our lives. Hold on.
Yeah, I think it tells us to take a break.
Take a break? Okay. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so much converges on us. If you don't step back sometimes, you think that you're later or whatever. So I think my world, taking a break is really important. That's what I go to do.
Great. So give us this opportunity to take a break, maybe take a step back and take stock and reevaluate what's important. I love that. That's great. Brian, what were you going to say?
Life is full of transitions.
Yeah.
This morning, Rabbi was talking about first verse, last verse.
Uh-huh.
How that is sort of life.
Uh-huh.
I think it also, I was just, again, help us to counterate. Order Scotch specifically doesn't mention Maraveh.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mention Beth at all.
Mm-hmm.
The second to last stanza talks about Chaim.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Instead, so sort of reorienting.
Mm-hmm. So if I can just sort of maybe pull out an interpretation, it's helps us transition, helps us sort of have a bit of a reset. This is kind of a word you've been using, which I really like. And maybe gives us an opportunity to place an importance on those moments outside of the shul, outside of a davening context, right? Sure, you could be moving from your bedroom to the kitchen and you need a spoon. That's whatever, it's fine. Hopefully you remember that you need the spoon. Or you could be moving from a baby naming to a funeral. You could be moving from traffic to an important meeting. You could be moving from coffee with a friend to like, God forbid, a fender bender, right? These are all very different experiences. And so too are the different pieces of liturgy, pieces of prayer in our liturgy, different experiences. Yeah? Yeah, go ahead.
Also serves as a placeholder for holiness. Because like it's easy to think that Baruch and Shema, those are like holy things.
Yeah.
They're identical. Yamida is a holy thing. And then there's this thing in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And the things in the middle in life have space for holiness.
Mm-hmm.
There's room for holiness, even in the little things that are happening in between.
Beautiful, beautiful. Placeholder for holiness, excuse me. And that's I was playing the Guess What I'm Thinking game, and you win, because that's what I was sort of thinking in many ways, of having a moment to sort of step back, sort of like Irv was saying, and to sort of recalibrate, like Brian was saying, and say, all right, where's the holiness in this moment? Where's the holiness between getting coffee with a friend and meeting up with my parents? Where's the holiness between leaving a meeting and getting into a fender bender with another person who just wasn't paying attention? The Kaddishes, I think, are a type of teaching tool to empower us to figure out where are the holy moments in our day-to-day, right? Where are the holy moments in both the big things, the big transitions, and the small transitions? So I want to invite us, as we go forward into the next service, sort of think about everything we've talked about in the course of this class. And when we come to a Kaddish, ask yourself, what transition am I making? How am I being buoyed from one piece of the liturgy to the next? And then as we move out of Shabbat with Havdalah, which is another big transitionary kind of ritual, ask yourself, what does it mean to move from Shabbat to the week? And then take this sort of sensibility into your week as we move from the mundane to the mundane, and take an opportunity to find the holiness in those moments. So with that, I thank you for engaging in a more question-heavy discussion. I was really excited to try a more heavily participatory kind of class, and y'all did disappoint, so thank you so much.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to www.tbala.org.